spiritual condition is a mere portal of perception. And yet when our ego attaches itself firmly to sense consciousness, believing only what it sees physically in this three-dimensional world, then it becomes adverse to life itself. Then it transmutes into its unnatural state, into the adverse ego. I love and honor this distinction. When we see only with our physical eyes and either disavow or pay scant attention to what we see with our spiritual eyes, that's when the trouble begins. That's when the bad and the ugly shows up. Now, we all have spiritual eyes. I believe they're right here. And if you take just a moment and go within, you don't have to close your eyes. I think if you take a moment, you can sense them. You can sense your spiritual sights just above each eye, inside a little bit. It's a little different than your third eye. The spiritual sight allows you to see beyond the world of form to the truth. It allows you to see past outer expression and to see love. There's a true student named Fred Burks who's written quite eloquently on our spiritual eyes. And it's in your bulletin. I'd like us to read it together. On the second page. Join me. The spiritual eyes see beneath all physical matter to the place where everything in the universe is interconnected in a divine cosmic dance. When I see, express, and interact in harmony with the vision of my spiritual eyes, transformation flows and miracles happen. When you see with your spiritual eyes, you see that you are not what is happening to you. You are not that. You are so much more than that. When you see with your spiritual sight, you create a space. It's a divine space. And within that space, you have freedom of choice. You gain your divine perspective. It's that big step back where you can see, oh, what's happening in my life is not my life. A couple weeks ago, I shared Albert Einstein's observation that you cannot solve a problem at the same level of the problem. There's no space. When you're at the level of the problem, you have no space. There's no breathing room. There's no perceiving room to get a clear understanding of what's going on. Let's say, I want you to picture yourself right now, you're smack dab in the middle of a city traffic jam. All right? I want you to see it. It's hot. It's smelly. There's exhaust fumes everywhere. There are cars as far as you can see going in front of you. There are cars as far as you can see behind you. You're bumper to bumper and sidewall to sidewall. Are you there? You having fun? And you think, drat. I'm stuck. I am stuck right here. I am stuck, and there's nowhere to go. And at that moment, a helicopter choppers down right above you, drops you a ladder. Up you go. The helicopter rises up. And from this new vantage point looking down, you can clearly see what you couldn't see before. That the streets that parallel you on either side are completely empty. Completely empty. You couldn't see it before. You had to rise above it. You had to transcend it. This is the gift of spiritual sight. I haven't used this yet. I've already gotten through the bad. The first part was the bad. Now we're down to the ugly. When the ego attaches itself to form, when it's gripped to form, Velcro to form, like this is it, and there's nothing else. When your ego is there, things get ugly real quick. Am I right? Okay. I just want to be sure that we're understanding one another as best as spiritually possible. A friend of mine has been on a remarkable spiritual journey. I mean, remarkable. And I want you to know that she's in a really good place. She's in a phenomenal place. The journey, it's not over. There's more to do. There's more to experience. There's more to love. There's more to understand. She's in a great place. She's worked with a number of people. One of them is a man who is both a behavioral cognitive therapist and a spiritual medium. That's a pretty powerful combination from my vantage point. He shared with her this truth. He said, it takes many lifetimes to grow up. It takes many lifetimes to grow up. And he helped get her to a point where she could hear that, where she could take it in. And then she knew. She came to a place of peace where she understood that she didn't have to get it all done in this lifetime. Have you ever worried about getting it all done? I have. I have. I got to get it all done. I got to get it all in. I got to have all those experiences. Now, here, many lifetimes. My friend, in her 50s now, has spent most of her lifetime, I think it's fair to say, emotionally isolated. Emotionally isolated from the time that she was a little girl, a very little girl. She became emotionally isolated through abuse suffered at the hands of her father. She became emotionally isolated by the abandonment of a mother suffering from alcoholism. She learned that she couldn't express herself. She was the oldest of 5. Somebody had to be responsible in the family. Somebody had to be the adult. This is when she was a child. What a burden. She told me, she said, I mixed up God and my father. Let me share why. These are her words. She said, I became terrified of anything that appeared to be masculine power. Anything. Her home was dominated by masculine power, oppression. She kept bumping into masculine power, be it good, bad, or ugly. But masculine power, masculinity in itself became terrifying to her. She saw it everywhere in our society, in our culture. She experienced it later on in corporate life. And from the time she was a little girl, it was right in front of her in church. She said she panicked every time she was about to say the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, the masculine. She was absolutely terrified before the serving of communion because she was being offered the body and the blood of a man. And all this was being watched over by a naked man up on a cross. feel, you sense just a little bit the emotional isolation, the terror that she ran into everywhere she looked. My friend became profoundly depressed. Now, through years of spiritual and therapeutic work, she was led to the gentleman I referred to earlier, the psychologist who was also a medium, and she was led to a gifted and caring doctor who believed that ECT could help her. ECT is electroconvulsive therapy. It used to be called electroshock. What they're using today bears almost no resemblance to what was being used decades ago. You know, those horrible things that you may have seen in movies or even documentaries. It's just vastly different. And yet she shared with me, she said yes to this. She shared with me that it really does shock your system. It really does shake things up. It gets things that were stuck unstuck. It opens up all the inner energetic pathways. I imagine it's like a system reboot on your computer. You know? Where you clear out all the energetic blocks. And for her, it was a reboot. It was more than a reboot, it was a rebirthing process for her. What does a child do? A child who is not abused asks for help. Says, Daddy, help me. Mommy, help me. Hold me. Feed me. Play with me. See, throughout her life, she could not ask for help. She couldn't ask for help. After the ECT therapy, she did. She opened up to admitting that she was suffering, because she never admitted she was suffering before. She contained it all. When we're suffering and we don't admit it to ourselves or others, what's the human response? It is depression. She admitted she was suffering. She became open to her friends. She stopped hiding from them. She said, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is what's going on with me. She accepted their help. She accepted help from her friends, from her therapists, and from her medical doctors. She became open. Eckhart Tolle writes this about suffering. As long as you resist suffering, it is a slow process because the resistance creates more ego to burn up. Resistance to suffering creates more ego. It's more of the, in Charles' terms, more of the adverse ego to burn up. However, when you accept it, there is an acceleration of that process which is brought about by the fact that you suffer consciously. You accept suffering for yourself, or, and this is miraculous, you can accept it for someone else, such as your child or parent. In the midst of conscious suffering, there is already the transmutation. The fire of suffering becomes the light of consciousness. Conscious suffering means to admit, I'm suffering. I am suffering. It's not who you are. It's not who you are, but it's what is going on. It's not pushing suffering away, because the harder you push something away, suffering or anything else, the harder it will push back. It is embracing what is, simply embracing what is going on. And as you embrace it, you disempower it.